everyone. My name is Kevin Hasser, and I am a grants manager at the Department of Small and Local Business Development, working primarily with the DC Main Streets program. You are here to attend the FY25 DC Main Streets Applicant Workshop. We did 4 workshops in person near each one of these 4 main streets that are available this year. And this is a virtual recording where we try to summarize and synthesize everything that was covered in those 4 workshops. We'll provide this online for applicants' benefit until the applicant close on November 18th of 2024 at 2 p.m. And we'll also provide the slide deck online as well for all virtual applicants as well as the folks who were able to attend the in-person session. All right, let's advance. So this is what we'll cover today in this agenda. First of all, we're going to go through DSLBD, the agency sponsoring this program, as well as its mission. We'll cover some basics about the DC Main Streets program, and then we'll do an introduction to the 4 DC Main Streets competed sites for this year. We'll also do a deep dive into the application content itself, taking a look at the program budget, which should be new for just about all applicants, and then take a look at the post-application process, both through the review criteria as well as anything that would ensue for the eventual grantees. We'll finally wrap up with some tips and general advice, and we had a Q&A session for the in-person sessions, but of course you can reach out to us via our email throughout the applicant window. So first and foremost, as indicated in the request for applications, I'll refer to that as the RFA moving forward. It says that very clearly that DSLBD only accepts applications through its online digital portal available at this hyperlink as you see on this slide right here. If you go into the hyperlink, you'll see a PDF of the grant program that's live right now for 2025 DC Main Streets. One final bit here, a little caveat as we go into the rest of this workshop. Anything covered in the recording of this workshop should be considered supplementary guidance. If there's anything that's in conflict with the formal RFA, then the terms of the RFA will prevail, but we don't think that that'll happen. As far as the mission and the vision of DSLBD goes, as the name implies, the core focus of everything that we do at DSLBD, from the grant programs to the other services, is really to support the small and local business community of Washington, D.C. We have that work done through a variety of agencies and a variety of programs. We'll cover a couple of them here, but that's really what we're here to do, and hopefully to provide some services to the overall constituents of the residents and tourists of the District of Columbia. Speaking of DSLBD, so these are our various programs. Commercial Revitalization, this program right here, is the program that I work within, and of course which houses the DC Main Streets program. We have a variety of other agencies and departments within DSLBD. Some of them are grant making, issuing funds out to the broader community. Some of them provide other services, but all in support, again, to the small and local business community. Within the Commercial Revitalization team, we are primarily a grant-making agency, service providers. Some of our core programs are these 3 here. Obviously, we're here to talk about the Main Streets program today, but we also certify and recertify the business improvement districts around the District of Columbia, as well as the Clean Teams program. You may be familiar with that as well. And then speaking of the DC Main Streets program, which is what we're talking about today, just a general description of what it is. We are this year up to 29 designated DC Main Streets within the District of Columbia. DC Main Streets program and DSLBD are sort of the umbrella organization above those 29 designated DC Main Streets. And then, of course, the Main Street program is part of a national movement called Main Street America, MSA. You see that down here at the bottom of the description. And DC Main Streets is the DC chapter of that program. There are state and territory level chapters for every region across America. Within DC itself, we estimate, this is an old estimate actually, we estimate the support of about 4,000 brick and mortar retail shops and restaurants across all 8 wards, and again across those 29 distinct, unique main streets. In the photos here, you might recognize this as a shot around Eastern Market, and then Deanwood Deli, as that gives away, is one of those restaurants right on the Deanwood corridor. A couple of additional things about DC Main Streets program. We do like to highlight each one of these goals here in these bullets available for you to read. Again, just focusing on how we intend to serve the small and local business community, what our guideposts are as we were looking at the RFA this year and coming up with new programs, new goals, and new ways for you folks who are competing for one of these 4 sites to talk about it. These 2 pictures on the right here are from the most recent Art All Night. This was up in Mount Pleasant, Columbia Heights on that main street. And then the one down here is from the Speakeasy in Glover Park. So moving on, we're going to take a look at the 4 competed main streets that are available. Now, I just referenced that there were 29 main streets as of this year. We have a new one, which we'll just get into in a moment. What is the story with the other ones? Well, all of those other main streets have operators already. Some of them have had operators for many years. They are they're currently serving the businesses on those business corridors. And so you won't see them featured here because they're not up for competition. What we're hoping to select here through this process are the new operators for each one of these 4 available sites. They would end up receiving a stipend in order to provide services to businesses on their respective corridors. So you might very well know about other DC main streets that are available outside of these 4, but of course those ones already have operators and are already in service. As you're looking to complete your application, you're going to want to consider which specific site of the 4 you want to focus your application on. This is a competitive opportunity, and in order to submit a complete application, you have to select one site. One site per organization per cycle is the rule for the applications this year. So pick the one that you feel is the best fit with your needs and your understanding of the local community. And with that, we'll take a look at the first one here. This is our newest Main Street. It was just designated by DC Council this past year. This is Foggy Bottom West End Main Street. It's located in Ward 2. And this is the full written description of the location of Foggy Bottom, but we always refer people over to this map. And this map is, again, hyperlinked within the RFA. You can use that for additional guidance. It's quite a lengthy description here, and technically the map here, the blue areas that are covered within this Main Street, are inclusive of the roads, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it. Because it's the first year of this Main Street's operation, it also has an elevated grant award amount, and so unlike the other Main Streets, this one has $175,000 annually for 2025. In ensuing years, that number will reduce to the standard Main Street award amount, which you will see on our next site here in Upper Georgia Avenue Main Street. This is a unique corridor. They're all unique corridors. This one comprises of Georgia Avenue, the very northern part of that in the city. You see it terminates here up at the border with Maryland, and it begins down here on the southern end around Military and Missouri Avenues. This is a written description of what the corridor looks like. And as I referenced before, this is the grant award amount, $150,080. That is for fiscal 2025, and you'll see that number replicated not just with the other 3 main streets that we're going to that are not the new sites, but also every other main street that I referenced earlier that is not in competition but is still in operation for the coming year. So there's our second site at Upper Georgia Avenue Main Street. The third site to consider is what we refer to as the Parks Main Street. It's a combination of Riggs Park down here on the east side, and then the half block of Manor Park up here comprised. They are the Parks Main Street. They're in wards 4 and 5. And then again, we're looking at an overall award of $150,080. And then the final Main Street that is going to be competed in fiscal 25 is the Deanwood Heights Main Street. It is a circular Main Street, the northern border of which is Sheriff Road, and then it comes all the way over to Division Road down here, and then Annie Helen Burroughs, wrapping back up to the edge of Minnesota Avenue. And this is the written description of it. It's entirely within Ward 7. And again, just as the other 2 main streets that are repeating this year, it has an award amount of $150,080. So you want to take a closer look at each one of those 4 main streets. We encourage you to reach out to the different stakeholders and community members within those, obviously the businesses themselves. That work will be essential to complete some of the narratives within this application, and then submit the best application you can to represent one of those 4. Speaking of the application, let's take a deeper dive into what that looks like, as well as overall eligibility here. We do try to keep eligibility considerations to a minimum because lots of different organizations come into service on DC Main Street corridors and serve those corridors in very different, unique ways that are very responsive to the needs of their individual and unique communities. And we don't want to necessarily get in the way of that approach. We do like to provide a lot of flexibility. Even so, there are a couple of requirements, one of them being that the application needs to be submitted through this Zoom Grants applicant portal, as I referenced earlier. Also, organizations must be DC-based 501c3 nonprofits. You have to be in full compliance with all DC and federal agencies. And then again, you need to submit that complete application with all its various components by the deadline of November 18th, 2024 at 2 p.m. And there are no exceptions to that deadline. Additionally, it's good to know that an organization that may have been suspended or terminated from a DSLBD grant program would not be eligible to apply for this opportunity until 5 years has lapsed since that termination. So if there was something that came up and you needed to have your prior award terminated for one of any number of reasons, you're welcome to apply again after that 5-year period has concluded. But in between, there is still a renewal of relationship and other work that needs to be done before you would be eligible again. And this is what the application will look like. So once you click into this hyperlink here, which again is the Zoom grants, and then the brief hyperlink AEC FY25 DC Main Streets, that link is again within the RFA. you'll be confronted with this page. You'll know you're in the right place because the only open program available is this DC Main Streets program. You're going to be presented with a couple of options. One, if you already have an account within Zoom Grants, if you've already applied for DSLBD grants, then you can feel free to log into that prior account up here in the top right-hand corner. Otherwise, you're going to need to create an account where you're going to start here on this page, and then in the ensuing pages, you're going to follow up with some of your personal contact information, which you'll use for logins, and then also your organizational data, because again, an applicant must be an organization, it can't be an individual, so there'll just naturally be some questions about the 501c3. But once you create this login, after that point, you will forever after be able to use the return applicant login up here, even if you haven't completed the application. Once you log in and you click into the program, you'll be presented with this little summary here. It's a very brief synopsis of some of the core components of that RFA. So you'll be able to understand what it is that you're applying for, and then you'll be able to scroll down and see all of these fields where you're able to enter your program information, your personal information, and your organizational information. You can see I put in a dummy account here. I logged in my information with a very competitive proposal as New York Main Street. I don't think I will win because my organization is based outside of Washington, D.C., but I use this just for observation purposes. So you'll see again, this was all the information that I had to put in to reflect my organization. If you're brand new logging into the Zoom Grants portal, you'll have to do the same. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll see a couple of other things here. First of all, you have the opportunity to create a collaborator for your account if you're working with another individual, maybe a colleague on this program. However, some people really just share those login passwords within folks within the organization, and so this is entirely optional. You don't need to have a collaborator. To navigate within the portal, of course, you'll use these hyperlinks down on the bottom, next, and then on other pages, you'll see a previous option pop up as well. But if we go into next, then you'll be confronted with one of the two core components of this application. We did try to streamline it as much as possible. One of them is the narrative component, and then the second one, of course, is the required document attachment. So the narratives are just about anything you have to write down, and so you'll see that some of these are going to be more of your typical narratives, your questions about experience and work on the corridor, exposure, and such. And some of them are going to be much more straightforward, kind of perfunctory questions. First of all, this multiple choice option about which corridor you're in fact applying for. And then second of all, as you can see here, some of the more technically narrative in that you have to write something into these fields, but easily accessible information about your FEIN, your DC business license number, and other things that appear on the screen. This is where you select which corridor you're applying for. And then as you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, past these questions here, we don't actually cover the questions within this applicant workshop itself for a couple of reasons. One of them is that the questions are provided in full within the RFA. So please take a look at the RFA. You'll be able to see all of the questions that people are going to be asking of you and that the panelists will be considering based on your responses. And then, of course, you'll be able to see that within the applicant portal as well. And then at the bottom, you'll see that there are a couple of applicant attestations, 1, 2, 3 in particular here. Again, just confirming that everything you've entered into this application is true. You're answering to the best of your ability and such. You'll complete your name here, and then you'll be done with the narrative portion. Now, you'll see here that it ends on question number 20. Now, 3 of these are just attestations, but I think about the first 5 or so are those short questions asking for your business license number. And so it's really only about a dozen narrative questions. They're asking you specific questions about your experience, your vision, why you're interested in this particular location, what you hope to serve, your understanding of the assets and liabilities of the corridor, and other similar questions of that nature. Down here, as indicated before, you have to navigate through the application, so you can go previous to where you came from, but we're going to go next into the applicant documents. And again, in order to submit a complete application, all of these documents are required. Now, you'll see that some of the documents are pretty straightforward. The 501c3 determination letter that came from the IRS, those are pretty stock. You should have easy access to those, and if not, then hopefully you have enough time to source them or source copies of them that you can include within your application. As you do so, you'll see that those documents are going to actually appear within the portal here, which is a helpful tool. So you'll see that in my dummy application, I have not submitted any of my documents yet, so I wouldn't actually even be able to submit this application because there's a lot of missing documentation here. Covering a couple of the things that might be unique for your situation, we do ask for your organization's most recently completed IRS 990. Some of you may have a what's commonly referred to as a note card 990 or a postcard 990, I should say. You can submit whatever it is that you have, but if you have submitted a 990 or a 990 plus an extension, we do ask that you submit the completed document the full submitted document, not just a cover sheet, in this application. If your organization is not yet 1 year old and you have not even submitted a 990 yet, then we do have a substitute document to be inclusive to those organizations, just an attestation clarifying your nonprofit status and your anticipated filing time. Financial self-certification, we've gotten some questions about this. This is a new thing that we're asking for. It is actually an easier document than the one that it replaces. Typically, what we would have requested in this field would be a full audit. However, most organizations, particularly the smaller organizations, don't get audited every year. And so instead, and the federal requirements for audit are actually becoming more stringent, that budget threshold is increasing more each year. And so it is more and more likely that organizations will not have that audit to provide every year. And so in lieu of that audit, we ask for a financial self-certification, which is essentially just a document outlining what an organization does and how it oversees its own budgets to protect its finances, to protect against fraud. And that document is signed and attested to by the executive director as well as the board treasurer, the board leadership. A couple of other things of note within these documents here, the resumes and bios of key individuals. Now, these are the individuals that you're proposing to take on leadership roles within the new Main Street. It's possible that you will not have selected an executive director or a program manager yet. If you have, though, that person would be a natural person to feature within this document, either in resume or bio form. However, what is most common is that you see a collection of folks who are going to be either on the board of directors or the advisory board for this Main Street. And so we ask that what you do is you attach all of those PDFs, merge them into a single document, and then you can attach that document for upload. A multi-page document featuring a series of resumes. And then a similar kind of document are the 3 letters of support from the businesses on that business corridor. The whole point of this grant is to provide direct services and serve as a direct point of contact and communication, support, and advocacy for those individual businesses on those corridors. And so it's imperative that you establish a relationship with those businesses in assembling this application in the first place. So very similar to the resumes or bios of the key individuals, we ask that you merge all of those PDFs into a single document for a single file upload. That upload might be many pages, but it should just be one file. And then the final thing of note here is the program budget, which we'll go into in the ensuing slides. We've provided a template for your program budget, but we do ask you to consider and submit a tentative program budget with a couple of guidelines in place. There are rules about how you can spend some of those funds. We want to be transparent about that as you choose to apply. And so let's take a deeper dive into that particular content here. Building your program budget. First of all, we want to take a look at some of the budgetary restrictions. First and foremost, this top bullet here is that in a typical granting year, and as is true in this current FY25 fiscal year, all grant funds must be spent within that window. Now, for us, a fiscal year starts on October 1st, and so of course that is in the past, that has already occurred, and then it ends on September 30th, which means that we are obviously working on a truncated fiscal year. The awards, even if they were to go out today for each one of these operators, would have to be spent in a consolidated fashion. To be clear, this does not mean that the awards are going to be prorated. We have already budgeted for the entire award amount for each one of these 4 Main Street sites. And so whoever the operators are selected to be for each one of the 4, they will receive those indicated award amounts. However, you'll just have a shortened period in which to spend those funds down, as everything must be spent by September 30th, 2025. Second of all, the grant funds have to be budgeted and used according to specific thresholds. We'll cover that in an exhaustive manner in the following slide. And then third of all, there are just some things that you cannot spend DC grant dollars on. Broadly summarized, they're down here in the list. However, the RFA goes into a little bit greater detail. A couple of things shouldn't be too much of a surprise here. Board compensation, food and beverages with one singular exception. Donations to nonprofit organizations, including religious institutions, donations to professional fundraiser, and of course you can read the rest here at your leisure. Again, there's a little bit more depth to these items covered within the RFA, so take a look and let us know if you have any questions. But a lot of these things shouldn't be too much of a question about whether you should be able to spend district dollars on that or not. Taking a look at the budget template itself. Now, this is the document that you're going to be downloading from the applicant portal. You'll open it and it should look very much like this, which is essentially a blank Excel document with a couple of fields already filled here, indicating what some of these budget lines are, and with some kind of curious language over here. So all of this is sort of a manifestation of what already exists within the RFA when the budget is discussed. So do take a look through the RFA and review those budget instructions. And then afterwards, take another look at this template. We have some general instructions here for your consideration, only 5 steps. It should be relatively easy on steps that you'll need to take. First and foremost, you're going to want to select your business corridor because we are dealing with different award amounts. And so this box here is actually a drop-down menu from which you'll be able to select the Main Street that you intend to apply for. Once you select that Main Street, then the grant amount that is available will auto-populate in this field right here. One of the restrictions as we go into these 5 items right here is your overall administrative budget. Now, generally speaking, the administrative budget includes a couple of things, the nonprofit indirect rate, and if that sounds like a new concept to you, the nonprofit indirect rate is actually a law that Council passed back in 2020 for all grants awarded to nonprofits that they can allocate over to indirect expenses, which are things that aren't program related. So for instance, it could be rent, it could be some additional salary lines, could be some other ancillary expenses it takes to run your organization. But back to the point, the administration includes the nonprofit indirect rate. It also generally includes staff salary lines. And one of the restrictions on this budget is that this amount cannot exceed 50% of the grant amount located up here. So it has to be under the 50% threshold in order to be eligible. You'll see that I have $0 in my grant amount and $0 in my administrative line right here. And so even though this is an incomplete budget, of course, it is still eligible because, 0 of 0. The second restriction here, we're taking a look at the subtotal for business support. Now, what is business support? Now, a lot of the focus of DC Main Street programs, each one of these individual 29 sites, is to issue direct support to the businesses on those corridors. That can come through one of 2 ways, typically. One of them, as you can see on line 13 here, is a sub-grant to a corridor business. That could support any number of efforts, maybe a facade improvement, maybe some other necessary work to be done within that business. A second thing is a small business technical assistance effort, and that increases the knowledge capacity or one of the other broader capacities of the business on your corridor. You can provide them training services in order to help them sustain themselves and grow, to stabilize their business. The subtotal for business support is a subtotal of those 2 lines. Those 2 lines in your budget have to be a minimum of $40,000. So here you see in this blank budget, I have $0, of course. That is below the minimum of $40,000, so this is not yet an eligible line. I know that already because it's an incomplete budget. I will show you what a tentative complete budget could look like in the next slide, but that's where that line comes from. The third restriction is our events line. Events are very, very popular for each one of the main streets. They all spend their events dollars in different and unique ways. Some of the events you might be familiar with, whether that be a Porch Fest or an Art All Night event or a Dine All Night event or one of the many other programs that DC Main Streets host each year. However, even so, sometimes events are an indirect benefit to businesses, and so we do like to restrict the amount of money, at least on this grant, going directly towards events. That restriction is $20,000, as indicated right here. And so on this budget, you'll see, although it is blank, I have $0 going to events, and therefore it is eligible. One of the final restrictions is to ensure that your matching total makes sense. As indicated in the RFA, to be eligible for this award, you need to either have access to or have an idea about how you're going to generate $15,000 in matching funds for your award. Now, to be clear, you don't need the $15,000 yet. Some organizations generate that $15,000 throughout the entirety of the fiscal year. And if you have a question about where the $15,000 match can come from, well, there's a lot of different places. One of the only restrictions is that it can't come from another DSLBD program. But it can come from donations, it can come from board contributions or other contributions from your businesses or residents. It can come from earned revenue. If you host an event and charge admission, then some of those funds could go into your matching fund. And for those who may not be familiar with the term, a match is really just additional funds coming into the program budget. And so if you are applying for a grant that has $150,080 award amount, then the additional $15,000 would come from another source and just be indicated in some line here. I'll show you how that manifests on the next slide. The final thing to consider here is just making sure that that your totals equal to the same amounts. And so ensuring that the total you're anticipating spending for your budget reflects the exact same amount as you're anticipating for your income, for your revenue. Let's take a look at what something like that could look like. So this is my dummy application. You'll see that my organization is featured up here at the top, and I've selected Foggy Bottom West End Main Street as my applicant site. That is automatically manifest as a $175,000 potential grant award. And you'll see I've done everything I can to make sure each one of these lines is eligible, which would make my applicant budget eligible to turn in. It doesn't determine whether it's a good budget or not. The panelists will be able to look at it and consider how you've put together these numbers. But since each one of these lines is eligible, it indicates that I've submitted, again, an eligible budget. So you'll see that my administrative line here is below 50% of what that grant amount is. You'll see that my subtotal for business support is actually quite high. I've allocated $45,000 to direct subgrants for businesses. I've also made an additional $10,000 available for small business technical assistance. So in total, my $55,000 is above the $40,000 minimum. You'll see too that I really wanted to maximize my events budget, and so I used every dollar I could, and I allocated $20,000 to that events line. And you'll see that I've added $15,000 exactly in my matching funds, and I've also allocated that to my events line. I have a lot of events on my corridor, or I'd like to assemble a lot of events. I know that I'm going to need more than $20,000, and so I've allocated my matching funds to that. Now, as an example, some people say that the administrative line might be too low for a salary for someone that they're interested in recruiting. In that case, you could move your matching funds from the events line, in my example, to administrative in yours. There is, again, a lot of flexibility in how these dollars can move around within the confines established by these eligibility lines here. And then as a final point, you'll see that my subtotal for all expenses from my DSLBD funds equals the award amount of $175,000. So that makes this budget eligible. I would be able to complete it, save it, and then upload it back here on this page. So that takes us to November 18th. What comes afterwards? Take a look at the application review. Actually, before we get to November 18th, we'll take a look at November 5th, 2024, that Tuesday, election day as it is. And one of the things that DSLBD wants to provide all applicants is we will provide a blanket review of all documents within the portal at that time, all documents and all narratives of all applicants. You don't need to submit. In fact, we would encourage you not to. But if you've uploaded something, draft text or otherwise, then the staff of DSLBD will review that content on November 5th and in the ensuing days afterwards for an initial eligibility review. To the best of our ability, we'll tell you the things that still need to be included, or if you have mistakenly attached some incorrect documents for something that should have been included instead. We'll try to get that information back to you as soon as possible. Regardless of whether you take advantage of that eligibility review or not, all applicant content, final applicant content, is again due on November 18th, 2024 at 2 p.m. Again, no exceptions. Review panels will occur over the following 2 weeks. It will be complicated for us because that is around the time of Thanksgiving, but we will try to expedite the process as much as possible. What that panel process is going to look like is that we will promise there will be unique panels for each one of the 4 unique Main Street sites. We try to bring in panelists that represent a wide diversity of experiences, both professional and otherwise. You'll see some of them listed here. Because Main Streets are very unique entities and they provide incredible services, a lot of services to a wide range of constituents, each one of them have unique challenges and unique opportunities. And so we do try to get a diverse set of panelists into the room to review each one of the applicants for those Main Streets. We'll try to get all those done in the 2 weeks following. And this is exactly what they're going to be considering as they weigh the content of your application. So I did reference that there are going to be about a dozen narrative questions that you have to complete. They're going to ask you about your organization, how it meshes with your understanding of the Main Street corridor, what you hope to do, and similar such questions. Those are questions that you have to directly answer. These are the criteria by which the panelists will evaluate your questions. Now, none of this is secret too. All of this is, again, featured in plain language in the RFA, but we wanted to highlight it here as well because while you are answering your narratives and while you're drafting your attachments and uploading them for your complete application, you're going to want to do so with each one of these criteria in mind. So for instance, just looking at the first one, the applicant has a clear mission and vision statement supported by its board and leadership. Now, within the application, there is a question about the organization's mission and vision, but the answer to that question doesn't necessarily state whether your board and leadership support it fully. And so it's up to you in the attachments that you submit and in how you respond to the narratives to prove that each one of these things is true. We generally break up the scoring criteria into 4 different buckets, and they're evaluated according to these different weights. So you see there's slightly more weight attached to collaborative strengths as well as to the project ideation and management. Notification and awards. Once the panels conclude, what happens afterwards? What we will try to do to the very best of our ability, as indicated in the RFA, is we will try very hard to send out these grant notifications on December 2nd of 2024. It's going to require us to operate on a very accelerated timeline relative to where we are right now. But we would like to try to do so because, again, as referenced earlier, we are already working on a consolidated fiscal year. And the earlier we can get funds out to the new operators of these main streets, the earlier those funds can go out to serve the businesses within those respective corridors. So right now, our goal is to get this out on December 2nd of 2024. What you can expect is either a grant package, a letter of ineligibility, or a letter of denial. Hopefully you receive a grant package. If so, what that would look like is, first of all, you would receive an email from us to the email address on file that you submitted Zoom grants through with what we call a notification of grant award, or a NOGA. That's just a very quick, easy email, a congratulatory email with a notification that the award should be coming and an award amount, and it asks for your receipt, acknowledgement, and acceptance. Once you respond to that and accept it, then we would follow up with the formal grant agreement. That's a multi-page document that's going to require some consideration from your overall organizational leadership. That would be the executive director as well as the board of directors. And it also comes with some additional content requirements that you did not submit yet in your application. One of them is proof of eligible insurance coverage. We don't ask for that during your application because you haven't actually been issued an award yet, and we don't want people to commit to the expense of that insurance without understanding whether they'll receive the award or not. But with the notification of the grant award, you will, at that point, be required to acquire insurance. Fortunately, you can use some of those grant funds to cover those annual insurance costs. Additionally, we'll ask for a finalized board roster for your leadership board, as well as signed conflict of interest statements that need to be signed by the board leadership, as well as the program manager for that respective main street. You also need to register in DC's District Integrated Financial System, or DIFS for short. It's essentially what enables the district to be able to make direct deposits to your account so that you can receive grant award payments in an expedited manner. Following the delivery of all this material, we'll issue you the first 50% of the award, and then the final 50% will be broken up into two additional buckets that will be delivered once you meet deliverable deadlines in the ensuing months later on in the granting year. This date of disbursement of the first 50% is entirely subject to the delivery, the receipt of these materials. So the earlier we can get these materials from each grantee, the earlier the DSLBD can issue the first 50% of your award, and you can get to work. What that granting year looks like, the first year for any Main Street operator tends to be very exciting, but also quite challenging as you navigate the new relationship between the various stakeholders, your supporting businesses, and of course mapping out any events, all of which tend to be much more complicated than initially visualized. From DSLBD's perspective, we also have a couple of reporting requirements and some other ancillary things that all Main Street operators need to do. One of them is having quarterly in-person meetings. We all gather at locations around the city once per quarter in a variety of different locations so that each Main Street can talk more about what they do. We can troubleshoot problems together. We can share resources. Second thing is a semi-annual Main Street report. It's actually a reduction from this prior year. We asked for quarterly reports. And so we will ask you for status updates on business services and what you're seeing on your corridor, challenges, vacancies, and the like. We also ask for monthly financial reporting, and this is really just to encourage you to submit those invoices and receipts on time because the delivery of those invoices and receipts for those eligible grant expenses is what's going to determine when and how you receive your second and third award disbursements. So we do have a monthly deadline for that. And then the other thing that should be on your calendar as a grantee is attending the annual Main Street America Conference. This coming year, it's going to be on April 7th through 9th, and that's in Philadelphia. And that is to broaden your national network, again, reflecting the national nature of the Main Streets program. All DC Main Street operators are required to attend that. And again, your attendance at that conference is something that can be paid for through these grant funds. In addition to those activities in your first year, you will also be designing and activating a transformation strategy. Now, this is a term that is also referenced within the application narratives. And so we do encourage you to take a look at some resources, which I'll share on the following slides here, taking a look at the Main Street America website, which is where this term transformation strategy comes from. As somebody at a prior session said, it's really just a way to kind of compartmentalize and communicate the basics of economic development. Transformation strategy is, as it says right here, a roadmap for your community. It's not prescriptive about how your community needs to grow or what resources they're necessarily looking for. However, it is a prescriptive approach to soliciting that information from your community stakeholders. Probably it describes a lot of the work that your organization, that you are already doing for your community, and it just compartmentalizes it in a different way. Here's some of the other icons from that transformation strategy. Again, Main Street America uses this 4-point approach in economic vitality, in design, in promotion, and in organization to sort of structure the transformation strategy for each Main Street corridor. But to be clear, the transformation strategy for each Main Street is going to be unique. It's going to reflect the needs of that respective community, and it's going to evolve in a unique manner over time as well. But it really just helps you design what that overall approach is going to be, set long-term goals to hold yourself accountable, and measure your own ability to succeed according to those metrics and figure out where you might need to pivot in future years. We reference it a little bit within the application. We talk about it quite a bit with the ultimate grantees. And so we do encourage you to take a look at these pages. It's not a lot of content, but do take a look at these pages within this hyperlink here. And again, the hyperlink is available within the RFA as well. And in this final slide for this presentation, I did want to cover just some tips and general advice. And this is true of all DC Main Street applicants, but it's also true of just about anything else that you might find yourself applying for within district government or some other granting agency. First of all, we encourage that you draft your responses outside of the portal. Although there is an autosave function within the portal, it's not 100% reliable. And so we would encourage you to draft your responses in Word or some other note-taking program, and then copy and paste those once you feel confident with the content and you're close to submission. We also encourage you to start working on collecting your required documentation as soon as possible, because if there's an issue with some of that documentation, the timing to fix it is oftentimes outside of the applicant's control. Particularly if you're working with something like this example, an invalid clean hands, you'll have to work through the Office of Taxation and Revenue in order to even diagnose what the issue is and then ultimately resolve it. And so anytime you're working with other parties outside of your own, you'll have to work according to their timeline. We encourage you to start dealing with those things as soon as possible. For accessibility for the panelists, we encourage all uploads to be PDFs. You can upload Word documents, you can upload Excel documents, you can upload a variety of things. However, there's no guarantee that your documents will be visible to the panelists or that they will be able to see them exactly how you've designed. PDFs are unique in that regard, and so that's what we encourage. We also encourage you to start inquiring with the community that you hope to represent. And there's really no earlier time to do it than now. So feel free to reach out to them, ask them for advice, see what their thoughts are. See if your vision meshes with what they feel like they need. There's really no earlier time to do it. Keep a copy of that scoring criteria that we shared on that earlier slide with all those percentages. And most importantly, find a way to write to that criteria, because the panelists are going to be evaluating your questions according to that criteria. So feel free to start referencing the criteria and making sure that you feel as though you're sufficiently answering all of those bullet points within your narratives as you go along. We avoid something that we commonly refer to as grant speak, which oftentimes kind of boils down to superlatives. Maybe your organization feels as though it does the best of something, or does something at the lowest cost, or reaches out to a unique community that no other organization serves. But anytime you include one of those superlatives, it really encourages panelists to question the veracity, the truth of that statement. Sometimes they might know of an organization that might do a similar thing, or they might actually be wrong in your assertion. If that's true, it prompts questions from panelists that can be a distraction to the work that you're actually doing. And so instead of using that kind of superlative language, we really encourage applicants to talk more about the work that they are actually doing, the work that you have done, and the work that you want to do. All of that is stuff that is much more within your control. And to that end, we always encourage folks to have someone outside of your organization, or maybe even your discipline, to read through the application and get their feedback. There's no guarantee that any one panelist will have familiarity with your work, with the business corridor itself, or with the kind of work that you would hope to do. Again, we look for a wide range of experiences for each of these panelists, and so it's quite likely that there's going to be some panelists who may not be as familiar with your content as you are. And so we encourage you to write to that and always have a teaching perspective as you're putting your narratives together. As we say here in the second to last bullet, that there is a difference between doing the work and talking about your work. In this application and many others that you might encounter, we do encourage you to try to do both as much as possible. And again, that final bullet there, try to leave the panelists without any questions. And that's it. That's what we have for the presentation today. If you have additional questions, please follow up with us directly at dc.mainstreets@dc.gov. If you submit within, I believe it's the Friday before the applicant due date as referenced on the RFA, then we will do our very best to get back to all of your questions with sufficient time that you can use that content within your application. These are office hours, but but for feedback specific to this applicant opportunity, we do encourage you to use this email address at dc.mainstreets@dc.gov. Good luck. Let us know if there's anything that we can do to provide any clarity, and we hope to see your application. Thanks.